Thank you, Raj. Thank you, Hamdi. So I think you already got a little preview of our next session. We'll be continuing the conversation about supporting migrants and refugees, not only to survive, but to thrive. So excited to welcome to the stage Devex reporter Elissa Miolene, who will lead this next discussion. Elissa, I'll hand it to you.
Hi, everybody. Hello. So my name is Elissa. I am a reporter at Devex, and I would like to introduce you to my lovely panel that I'll have joining me. So we have Amy Pope, who is the Director General of the IOM. Sasha Chanoff, who leads RefugePoint. America Ferrera, who is both an award-winning actress and IOM Goodwill Ambassador. And we have Nasra Ismail, who leads Alight US. And I'm thrilled to have a conversation with you all. We are talking today from crisis to opportunity, shaping pathways beyond humanitarian aid. And today we're really going to dig into migration, pathways to migration, what works, how folks who leave their home country, come to a different country, or move within their own country can really be contributors to the societies that they land in. So with that, Amy, I want to start with you. Tell us a little bit about the context here. Please set the stage for us.
All right. So there's some good news and there's some bad news. The bad news is there are more people than ever on the move today, and people are moving for a whole variety of reasons. Obviously, people are moving because of conflict. Right now, we have the biggest displacement crisis in Sudan. Over 10 million people have been displaced, followed closely by the displacement crisis that's ongoing in Congo, where 7.5 million people have been displaced. So we have people who are moving all the time because of conflict, but increasingly, we have people who are moving as a result of poverty and as a result of the impacts of climate change. And that's the place where I think we really need to focus, because hundreds of millions of people are now living in communities that are extremely vulnerable to climate shocks. And we know, because we see it play out every single day. And by the way, if you turn on the news right this second, you'll see millions of people who are currently in places that are flooded, places like Nigeria, South Sudan, Bangladesh. And we know that that is going to be our future, absent some drastic intervention by governments who finally recognize they need to do more to mitigate the impacts of climate change. So the bottom line is that we have many, many people moving, and we will expect to see more as a result of the impacts of climate, conflict, and poverty.
Thank you, Amy. So
there's good news, by the way. We're going to get to that. Just so stay tuned.
Now, a lot of numbers, a lot of bad news there, as Amy said. I do want to boil it down a little bit. In America, I'm going to turn to you. You recently became a Goodwill Ambassador for IOM because this is a topic that's really dear to your heart. I want you to tell us a little bit about your journey, why it's dear to your heart, and what you feel are the biggest challenges and opportunities that migrants face.
Yeah. Well, I'm the daughter of Honduran immigrants to the United States. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California. And, my whole life, I noticed that there were a lot of reflections missing in our culture that had anything to do with the reality of my life and the reality of my hopes and my dreams and the people like me. And so I've been hyper aware before I really had the language of it for our storytelling around who migrants are and who immigrants are. And I've spent my career as a storyteller, as an actress, a director, a producer, trying to make that story a human story. And I think my reflections on what's happening in this moment is that we're so far from the humanity of this conversation. The conversation has been co-opted as a political tool to sow hate and fear and for people in power to stay in power. And I think it's time for those of us who consider ourselves storytellers and communicators to really think about how we take that conversation back and how we tell a different kind of story, a story that is just flat out true, which is that we all move. People move. We move for work, for life, for love, for adventure, for all kinds of things. And none of us don't relate to that story. We all want all the same things that every person who moves wants. They want safety for themselves, for their children. They want to put their kids to bed at night, hold them, know that they're safe. These are the stories that we can tell about what immigration is, what migration is, on top of what Amy is so great at speaking of about, which is the incredible potential and opportunity and actually necessity that the world has and every country has for migrant populations to thrive and to succeed. And so, you know, from where I sit, my involvement is about compelling people to tell a new story and to capture the global imagination in a new way and to take the conversation back from those who are using it as a weapon.
Thanks, America. And, you know, I think that this aspect of storytelling is a really important one, right? What is the truth that we're telling, and what is kind of the narrative that we're telling? We have another really interesting story on stage, which is Nasra. I mean, you also had an immigration story. And I'm curious how what America said reflects for you.
I relate to so much of what you said. I relate to so much of the numbers that have been shared. My name is Nasra Ismail, and you may not know, but yes, I was displaced as a very young child from Somalia in 1992, arrived here in the US, in Oakland, California. I have so much pride in the first place that really embraced me. So if there's any Californians out there, say it, say it. I love it. I love a little community engagement. So yeah, I was one of those millions of people. But, you know, I have a face. I have a story. My family has a face. Every community that I've met has a face, has a story. And we all have this opportunity to take what is the first experience, the first harshness of life, displacement, and say, that's not all of our stories. That's not it. That may just actually be the beginning. So I stand before you as a leader in the philanthropic sector, in the NGO sector. I worked 8 years for the US government, 3 in private sector. I know you're like, how old are you? 4 in philanthropy. And then the most incredible, remarkable experience for me is when I went back to the place where I experienced displacement. And I saw my family and the people who hadn't seen before. And I showed up and they said, you were our donor. You were our philanthropist. You sent money when you didn't have any. At that time in 1992, my family was sending minimum 60 to 70% of our earnings back home. We were taking care of 2 homes, the one we were making in America and the one we were missing every single day in Somalia. So I come at this work reframing the narrative of refugees as donors. They've been donors. They are philanthropists. And to be honest, given what's happening in this country of mine, which I love and sometimes makes me angry, I just want to show everyone who's either being live streamed or here, if you have a story like mine, we love you. We love you. And I want all of you to say it. We love our new Americans. Say it with me. Say it. Say it, because we have to be as loud as the other narrative. The one that says they're doing this. We don't repeat those fears, but we only respond is love. So at Alight, we really are just trying to make that an actual program in Minneapolis, the Somali community, the Hmong community, every community that's come before me or after me, they're unleashing a new way of belonging, a new American community, a new community of founders who are going to change our very fabric of democracy. Not to be feared, but to be allowed. Not to be feared, but to be loved. And so I have the honor of looking at what community looks like in the US, in Minneapolis, in Maine, in LA, and say, stop with the nonsense. Let's get to work.
Thank you so much, Nasra, for those words. I think, it's so great to have folks who have really gone through this journey with us. And, you know, my grandparents also migrated from Italy and had a, you know, kind of starting over. It's something we all Americans really can speak to, or at least many of us. I think that what I'd really like to dial into now is, how do we help immigrants succeed in this country? Sasha, tell us a little bit about what you've seen work, what we need to have in this country and in others to really help folks resettle and rebuild in their new lives.
Thanks, Elissa. It's really great to be here. So fun to be with IOM too, because I used to work for IOM, and one of the experiences I had was in the Congo as part of a small team sent there to evacuate people who were being attacked. And the life and death dilemma that we faced there actually led to starting RefugePoint, which finds solutions for people. But I wanted to just say that before people arrive here, there's a critical importance of figuring out how they can get here. And to add to Amy's bad news about like the numbers and everything, criminal networks actually benefit about $7 billion a year and prey mostly off of women when people are forced to flee and they put their lives in the hands of traffickers. When we create more legal migration pathways, that is ways for refugees and others to get to the US through resettlement, through labor mobility, through sponsorship, we are creating safety and we're creating opportunity for people once they arrive. So that's really critical. Just the other day, we helped 4 orphan kids from Sudan get to the US and reunite with their uncle here. And when I watched that happen, what it signaled to me and what I feel like is so important for all of us to keep in mind is that people are facing genocide, Congo, Sudan right now, and so many other places. And there's a real moral obligation. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here, but we have to stand up and help and do things. And Nasra and IOM and others are enabling us to do that. But there are also economic and security reasons why we have to stand up, create more legal pathways for people so they can get from one place to another safely. Amy mentioned climate change. We are facing a grim future with climate change, and unless we create more legal migration pathways for people so they can arrive in a way and are received by communities that welcome them, that enable them to build safe new lives and be productive. They're so incredibly productive, as Hamdi was just telling us, we will be failing. So we're all united here, and I feel like all of us should be around the importance of doing this in every country in the world so we can protect people.
Yeah, that legal pathways piece I know is something that America and Amy have both at least been really championing this week. How has that been going? I mean, what's the reception been like? We'll go to America and then Amy.
I say we go to Amy first.
You made eye contact with me at the wrong time.
So this is a place where the political rhetoric and the reality don't match, right? And what I've tried to emphasize this week as I've met with world leaders is that it's quite dangerous to have such a disconnect between what we need and what people are saying about what we need. So what we know is that because of the demographic pressures alone, the world needs migration, right? I find it fascinating that the BCG released a report last year that said, unless we have better migration policies, we will not achieve the Paris Green Climate goals because there simply are not enough people to do the work where the jobs exist. So it's not only in our economic self-interest to have better migration pathways, it's in the interest of the planet, it's in the interest of our youth, it's in the interest of our societies. So the goal here is to get behind some of the rhetoric and get to the people who see it. So we've really been calling on the private sector to be an active participant in this conversation because they know everywhere I go in the world, I hear from them, this is what they need. They need better migration policies and practices. Or talk to the mayors. The Mayors Migration Council is here this week engaging in UNGA. They know, they see it because they see migrants who come to their communities revitalize aging communities, bring new life, bring new experiences, and bring new business. So we're really switching the mindset, but it's not through, frankly, just appealing to people's moral incentives. We're demonstrating that it's in their economic self-interest to do this.
Absolutely. Over to you, America.
I mean, I have nothing to add to that. What I will say is just to emphasize that this is not the story anybody is talking about around a Thanksgiving dinner table, right? Like the story and what you just said about the other side and the other story that does not match the reality is so loud and people regurgitate it with such confidence and we haven't found a way to match the frequency and the loudness and the clarity of messaging so that when you're sitting at your Thanksgiving table and Uncle whatever says the thing that he's heard a million times, which is they're coming and they're taking our jobs, they're tanking our economy, there's an invasion at the border, there's no room for them, they're taking housing from homeless people, like that we have clear messages to say that's not true. It's not true. They're revitalizing economies. They're filling gaps in the labor market. And so I'm so impassioned, as we all should be, that these messages can't stay in rooms like this. They can't stay at UNGA. We only win if we capture the global narrative and certainly the national narrative in this moment here in the US, because it is the truth. So it should be the easier thing to message.
Yeah, and I do want to pop over to Nasra and then Sasha to hear a little bit about some of those messages. Give us some of those examples that you've seen in your work, in your communities that you're working in. Tell me what works, what you're seeing, what's actually going on the ground.
I want to amplify everything that everyone has said. I think a couple of things. When it comes to legal pathways, we need to know that a certain kind of standard has been opened up and set. The way we welcomed our gorgeous Ukrainian American community is a standard. It's different. We've attached jobs to sponsorship. We've attached more funding to sponsorship. We've attached a different kind of empathy. So I want us all to unlock the same, if not more empathy and more equitable and safe legal pathways for everyone else. You know, you can't just complain. Sometimes the standard is set and you want to point to that and say, that should be the North Star. So I really want to just say the way we welcomed our new Ukrainian community is so far better than what we used to do. So hopefully that is a policy that gets to be set on what works to not only counter the narrative, but also actually supersede and do the things that we know have been working for decades. Sponsorship. My family came via sponsorship. An American family said, yes, we're going to raise our hand. We're going to welcome you. We're the first faces of people you see at the airport that you've never been to before, but we're also going to show up. Mr. and Mrs. Kennedy are stories I tell about the teachers who've embraced my whole family, all of my 9 siblings, and have said outside of school, we're willing to stay at night to give you an additional English as a second language course. We're willing to help your mom who doesn't speak English find a shelter. We're willing to help her find her friends. So there's something that is revitalizing even at the community level. It's not just what government and UN and others can do. It's also community. It is our greatest lever of transformation. Come see it in Minneapolis. Go see it in Boston. Go see it in LA. It is everywhere, but yes, it doesn't have the storytelling frame that we need. So I would say sponsorship is a gold standard and it needs to be supported. And I want to say this is one myth that I want to get rid of. It's not you either get support from government or you either get support from your neighbors. It's both. Today's time, it's both, because I can also see the stories that Americans who've never been displaced are like, my heart is opened up. My whole expression of family is different. I feel like I've loved someone who I didn't even know that existed in my neighborhood. So there's something deeper and spiritual and socio-political and economic that's happening at the community level. And see the stories that both say the economic story, but also say we're seeing a redefining a blueprint of community in America. And it's only because of the gifts of the newcomer.
There's something very democratic also happening with sponsorship. An incredible thing that a lot of people don't know is that today, across America, about 2 million people have raised their hands in 50 states in over 12,000 zip codes across Republican, Democratic, and religious political divides to say, I want to bring in someone who's fleeing their home. And people have arrived from across the country through sponsorship programs that America has created, and not you, but our bigger America.
I, not publicly, but behind the scenes, it was all me.
So we're seeing that this is something that actually can heal an incredibly riven society right now, where there's so much distrust and yet sponsorship. And that core heart of welcoming people is something that we see unites us at a time of incredible division across religious and political divides. I wanted to say something else about what Amy said when she was talking about the needs of labor. There are about 60 million unfilled jobs across the US, Canada, EU countries, and many other places. Communities need people desperately. One of the new and exciting opportunities in this whole space around supporting refugees and forced migrants is the labor mobility pathway, which RefugePoint, IOM, Talent Beyond Boundaries, the UN Refugee Agency, with a number of governments are all leading the way on. We're seeing people arrive from Canada, from Kenya, who are refugees from Somalia and elsewhere, and across the Middle East to Canada, to the US, to EU countries, where they have jobs waiting for them and communities who want to welcome them because, as Amy said, they are revitalizing those communities. So this is an exciting moment of opportunity for us. And when we think about reframing the narrative, we were just talking about that. I think there are two ways that we have to think about that. We should not think about people who are victims. Can we actually get to a place where communities will want to bring people in, will compete to bring people in because we know that we need them. But when there's this narrative of people who are contributors and who are needed, that changes. It switches people's mindsets. Another narrative that I think nobody can argue against is the narrative of family unity. We have way too many children who've been separated from their parents, and we are creating pathways for families to reunite. And when we do that, and we see a mom with her son or daughter reunited after years apart, forced into separation because of the violence they fled, we know in our hearts that that's what we need to see across the world. So family unity has to be a core principle of all migration pathways.
Right. And, I do want to tap in a little bit more to this economic piece of this. I remember doing a story a couple of years ago post-Brexit, and it was about how a number of the different meat packing and producing factories were just empty. People, because those lines of immigration had been cut off, the UK was really struggling. And I think we see a version of that story whenever we see barriers to immigration. But if we flip the script, I'm curious what we see. Maybe Amy, you can start.
So when we talk about, and especially in the context of shaping pathways beyond humanitarian aid, I want to actually flip the script and frame this in terms of development and humanitarian assistance, because we tend to divide these conversations in a way that I think is really unhelpful. It's startling to many people to learn that their last year was $830 billion in remittances that went back to the countries of origin of people who were working abroad. $830 billion is a staggering amount. And we have seen examples, both because of projects we're engaged in, but just naturally because of community relationships or frankly, the ties that you've described, where the diaspora is driving development in the countries of origin. They're driving the exchange of ideas, they're driving educational outcomes, and they're driving a level of development that we would not see if we were to rely only on humanitarian assistance or development aid. And so our goal is really to flip the script and start to think about how do we use migration deliberately as a tool to get more sustainable, more inclusive development in the countries where many of the migrants we see are coming from. And so not thinking about this in terms of just what does it mean for a country like the United States to welcome migrants, but what does it mean for Somalia, which has this vibrant diaspora coming from the United States, from Canada, from India, from parts of Europe, to help shape the future of Somalia? And that is where we're seeing a huge difference. And that is the piece, frankly, that I think is groundbreaking.
Yeah, I guess I would be curious both for America and Nasra in terms of looking at your families, whether it be in Honduras or Somalia, extended family, if you've seen this type of kind of the remittances going back or economic opportunity going back. Maybe we can start with Nasra and then over to America.
I mean, like I said, we were donors before we even knew what donorship meant. And I think the love story that is between a diaspora and the two homes that they inhabit, which are minimum homes, because we've also with the pandemic have had many homes. So for all of us who have a history of, or an ancestry, even as far back as 100 years ago, of what it means to have had generations of your family come from one place to another, there is a deep love story that has not been really well studied. Remittances are one, but it's also leadership. but it's also cultural transference, but it's also in knowledge shaping, and it's also peace building. The amount of sort of hidden or invisible peace building that gets done, we get to be called bridgers, peace builders. We're literally doing diplomacy and nobody actually even knows it. So I totally agree with you, Amy, as someone who follows and is a fan of your work, especially the last year when you were running for this particular office that you're in. You might want to look at Amy's social media. It was one of the greatest stories that I've ever seen of equity on social media about what it means to take over a 72-plus-year-old entity that has never had a leader like you. So that kind of equity is also everywhere else. So diasporas have been doing this work. The light hasn't been on us. The long welcome and the long journey of integration, no matter where you are, Berlin, Bogota, Hargeisa, wherever you are, this is understudied. So please, I ask you, as many wonderful programs that are done by international NGOs, there are as many done by civil society, as many done by local organizations, and as many and many stories that have been done by refugee-led and diaspora-led organizations and activities. So there's just more. There's just more. We have to tap in.
You know, you asked the question, and the thing that popped into my mind first was how after my parents left Honduras, my mother didn't get to return back to Honduras for 25 years, and what a devastating heartbreak that was for her, and how through my whole childhood, Honduras was a folktale to me. You know, it was a place that existed in my imagination because I wasn't able to have that physical connection, and my mother wasn't even able to have that connection to her homeland. And you know, certainly there was communication and there was money being sent back and forth and that sort of thing, but there was no ease of movement. And when I think about Honduras, you know, I think about the root causes of migration, and obviously it's different everywhere and it's ever changing, and we're adding climate change and climate disaster on top of it. But I think a lot about the people who don't want to leave their homeland. And I think about how nobody wants to be defined by the worst thing that ever happened to them. And as migrants and children of migrants, that is one part of who we are. And people don't want a handout. And I certainly know my parents were never looking for that. And more than anything, my mother wanted to be connected to her family and to her homeland. And so that love of home drives me to think of how do we help people stay in places they want to stay. And it's not gonna happen by building walls and telling them not to move. It's not going to happen by locking them up. We know we deport people and they have no choice but to come right back because, as they say, no one flees home unless home is the mouth of a shark. And so I think about the opportunities we have and the solutions we can create if we expand the thinking to include dealing with the root causes of migration.
Could I just add one point? We've talked about remittances and the importance of addressing the root causes. There's another dimension, which is the philanthropic dimension, beyond governments, beyond the international aid that's going on. Philanthropists have a huge and outsized role here to create new and innovative ways of doing things and seeing that those succeed, and then governments can take that up. And in fact, this event was co-organized and thought through with the Network of Engaged International Donors, which is a growing philanthropic network, along with the Philanthropic Initiative. And there are many philanthropists here in the room and tuning in online that know that the work that you are doing in Honduras, in Somalia, across the world is actually supporting those communities to build peace-building efforts. So we can't forget or overlook and need to emphasize the value of private philanthropy and engaging in this space.
Wonderful. Well, I think that's all the time that we have today. So I just want to thank my panelists here so much for all of your insight. Thank our audience for listening. It's been great to chat.
Thank you.